have an opera, lecture, or anything that is going on in the city. Perhaps you would like some music? The National Orchestra plays this evening in the capital and you can have the full program or any part of it. I dearly love music, I replied, and what I have heard in this country has been remarkably fine, but swelling from mysterious tubes, or bursting from great mechanical contrivances imparts a weirdness to it that serves to heighten the unreality of my present position and surroundings. Do you know, I said with a sincerity that made her burst out laughing, that I have pinched myself a great many times since I reached these shores in the endeavor to awake? Even now, it would be no surprise to me to start and wake and yawn and open my eyes to find myself back in America and my wonderful experience of the past year a dream. I dare say you would be highly gratified to awake at this very moment, she said with just a shade of reproach in her voice. Oh no indeed, I cried with an impetuosity altogether out of keeping with the shortness of our acquaintance, at the same time rising hastily and approaching to where she stood by the mantel. I would not wake now for worlds. If it be, I said, repeating a fragment from one of her own poets that she had quoted at the table. If it be then that the seeming has more of beauty than the real, if only it be in dreaming I may find the land, O Lil, may I not continue dreaming? Were 't not cruel to wake again? Is not bliss e'en in the seeming preferable to real pain? A blush overspread her face, making it even more beautiful than before, and I too, flushed, feeling that I had gone too far for a rank stranger, as it were from another world. Very well, she responded, I would much dislike to wake you as long as your dream is pleasant, nevertheless, she added with a meaning glance, I shall reserve the privilege of dashing cold water on you whenever I deem it proper to rouse you to a consciousness of your real position. And turning, she walked over to the music stand and began to handle the sheets of music. This Parthian shot sobered me, and I begged her to remember the peculiarity of my situation, being as absolutely cut off from every female acquaintance on earth as if I had landed on another planet. Knowing only her mother and herself and meeting them as the wife and daughter of a countryman, I begged pardon, if like the lonely emigrant who meets a compatriot in a strange land, I presumed too much on a short acquaintance. My words or manner evidently convinced her of my sincerity, for turning and advancing with a world of sympathy in her beautiful eyes, she extended her hand with the most frank cordiality, and as I grasped her fingertips, almost daring to raise them to my lips, she assured me that her love and admiration for her father made it quite impossible for any countryman of his to be a stranger, and begged me to consider her an old friend. The touch of her hand made my blood tingle, and the sweet candor of her manner made me feel quite at home again. What I was going to remark, I resumed, was that the mysterious and automatic manner in which this music, news, and other entertaining things you suggest comes to us, heightens the unreality of my surroundings, and what I desired to make everything seem more real and less like an illusion, was something to remind me of home and life as I had been accustomed to it. This I presume is a musical instrument, said I, advancing to the piano, and if you will be kind enough to play something yourself I will enjoy it more than all the orchestras in the world, over a wire or through a tube. Without a moment's hesitation she complied, and sitting down to the instrument, she played several pieces with great skill and expression. Noticing a number of songs among the music, I asked her if she would sing. She consented, but asked me to waive my objections to the automatic and mysterious tube, as she preferred a violin obbligato to playing her own accompaniment. Selecting a piece of music, she approached the general utility telephone and, pressing a button, asked somebody, somewhere, for the obbligato to the song, giving the title. In a moment, soft and low like the sighing melody of an Aeolian harp, came the prelude to the accompaniment, and then in a voice full, round, and sweet, she rendered the song, the obbligato swelling and sinking and blending with the rich tones of her cultivated voice as though it were played by a master in the very room where we stood. Mrs. Morris entered the room while she was singing, and when the song was finished, at the request of her daughter, joined with her in a duet, her fine contralto voice blending beautifully with the other's soprano. At its conclusion I was asked for an American song, and as a fairly good baritone voice was the one single accomplishment I had been proud of at home, I complied and sang Rocked in the Cradle of the Deep, while Miss Morris played an accompaniment. I acquitted myself quite creditably and was gratified when they both admitted that no finer song had been composed in the Iron Republic. When Mrs. Morris reappeared after dinner, she too, was attired in evening dress made similar to her daughter's, though somewhat plainer, of some pearl grey stuff that was extremely becoming. Upon my risking a cautious compliment on her appearance, the conversation turned on the subject of dress, and I soon became aware that woman is woman the world over, be the surroundings what they may. I described to them the latest modes of dress in my country, and then there was the inevitable comparison between the different styles of the two countries. When I ventured a rough guess at the number of articles of apparel and adornment one of our fashionable ladies would wear at one time, they threw up their hands in horror and wondered how they had time for anything else but to dress and undress. I expressed my decided preference for the Iranian style as illustrated by their charming costumes, but told them frankly that it would not be tolerated in my country. "And pray what would be the objections to it?" asked my hostess. "To be perfectly plain with you, madam," I replied, "it would be considered that is, immodest." "But why?" "Because, my dear madam, it is, that is to say, I am delighted with it myself and can conceive of nothing more becoming," I stammered. "I am very glad," said Mrs. Morris, "but why should this style of dress be considered immodest in your country?" "Because, madam, if you will have it," I answered under protest, "it admits of too much exposure of the person. Then in the world you came from, one object of woman in dressing is to conceal the beauty of form which nature has bestowed upon them." "Yes, madam, that is, it seems so. Modest ladies attired as we are, in a drawing room would blush and be embarrassed." "Most undoubtedly, madam, at first. And yet on the stage where the most beautiful and artistic effects are aimed at, this style of dress is employed." "That is true, madam. It is also true that at the bathing resorts where the sexes are thrown into the closest juxtaposition, only the rudiments of even the Iranian style are worn. Now I will ask you candidly, Mr. Barrington, can you conceive of any more reason why the female form, which artists insist is the most perfect work of creation, should be disguised or concealed, than there is that the symmetrical proportions of a horse should be hidden under skirts, or a beautiful statue covered from the head down with a blanket?" Smiling at the forceful illustration of my hostess, I replied that I could not, though if crooked-legged horses and thin-shanked, imperfect statues could influence the fashion, even horses and statues might wear clothes. "No doubt of it," exclaimed my hostess. "And I seem to remember one of good old Aesop's fables about a fox who was unfortunate in the matter of his caudal appendage. May it not be, too," she continued, "that the fashion of concealment owes its origin to sentiments and feelings exactly the reverse of modesty? Is, after all, the revelation of such beauty, as the female figure possesses, any more suggestive than its concealment when such beauty is known to exist under the disguise? Indeed," she went on, warming up with the subject, "the commissioners excluded a most beautiful statue from one of our parks because of the indecent suggestion of the drapery. Here, we wear 3 or 4 garments and combine comfort, beauty, grace, and utility. In your country women wear a dozen or more, and the most complimentary thing I can say of them after studying their pictures, is that some are not as ugly as others. I'll dare say if Eve had come forth from the shady bowers of Eden and had met her lord and master dressed in the modern American fashion, the poor man would have scaled the fence and left the garden of his own accord." I laughed heartily at this sally, and looking slyly at me, Miss Morris observed that her mother must have some good reason for feeling so strongly on the subject. "Oh, I make no secret of it," retorted her mother good-humoredly. "I was once prevailed on by Professor Morris to array myself in all the glory of the American fashion as it prevailed when he left there, and appeared in public full-rigged hoop skirt and all. Ugh! It makes my cheeks burn yet to think of it. Seeing a crowd beginning to follow us, I ran into a house and begged the lady for the love of heaven to hide me while my husband called a carriage. I was taken home in hysterics and literally tearing the flounces and frames from my person. I held them over a flame till the last shred fell into ashes. That is, all but the wire in the hoop skirt, that the professor buried, and with it the last hope of making an American woman of me. It was weeks before I could muster courage to go on the streets again. Since then my husband has admitted that his preference for American dress only extended to me, and that for all other women he thought the style of the country much prettier and more desirable. Ah well, he has gotten over all that now, she concluded, as you will in time. I assured her that I was already well over it, and in the matter of female dress, if nothing else, I was an iron Republican to the core. Professor Morris arrived in the midst of a general laugh and remarked pleasantly that it did not appear that I was being ostracized as an alien. He then informed us that he had learned while out that there would be an especial attraction at the Capitol that evening in the person of Madame Shafton, who was to sing her latest song, and he had asked an usher from his office to connect us when her turn came. Madame Shafton, I was told, was considered the finest singer in the Republic and a composer of rare merit besides. Indeed, I was informed that in musical circles it was hardly considered good form for a person to play or sing anything except their own compositions, the exceptions being in the case only of music of extraordinary merit. In the midst of a general conversation some 10 minutes afterwards, a sudden hum of voices penetrated the room from the transmitter, and then clearly and distinctly came the words: "Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to bring forward one who is known and honored from one end of the Republic to the other, and who has always been a deserved favorite at the Capitol." Then, during the applause, which followed, very much in the American fashion, Miss Morris ran to the transmitter and, pulling out certain stops, drew what appeared to be a ground glass screen before it. At the same time, she turned off the lights, leaving us in the dark, except for a pale light, which illuminated the screen from the transmitter. This grew brighter, and then I saw, like a stereoscopic projection, what appeared to be an arena railed off in the pit of a great amphitheater, and in this arena an orchestra, and in front of it, facing the audience, a tall and remarkably fine-looking woman. She was dressed in a loose flowing robe in the style of the classical Greek period, with wide sleeves and bound loosely about the waist with a knotted cord. She wore sandals on her feet and a wreath of flowers on her head. The song was rendered and encored, the whole performance being as distinctly audible and visible to us as if we had been in the auditorium. After it was over and the transmitter had been adjusted to cut off any further proceedings, I asked if the people in the city generally were connected with these places of amusement, and was informed that everybody in the city and country was thus connected, who elected to pay for the service. If then, anybody may enjoy these entertainments in their homes, where do the audiences come from? I inquired. My dear sir, answered my host, if it were not for these arrangements it would be impossible to accommodate our people without greatly increasing the number of places of public entertainment. As it is, there is always a certain number who attend, for notwithstanding the perfection of our system of transmission, it is still more satisfactory to be present in person. I learned on inquiry that this extensive system, which pervaded the entire Republic, was established by the government along with electric lights and railroads. This particular branch of it, though it had been found expedient to let to private individuals in the different cities and communities, the system being let to the bidder guaranteeing the cheapest service. I was also informed that public entertainments of every kind were provided by the government without direct cost to the people, most of the great orators, actors, and musicians being pensioned by the state. As a result of this, said my host, poor artists do not afflict the public, and good ones are not at the mercy of avaricious managers and irresponsible newspapers. I found afterwards that the greater part of these artists were trained in the government conservatories to which they had been sent from the public schools on account of extraordinary talents and aptitude.